It was a total nightmare, honestly. People throw that phrase around all the time, but for me, it was real. I know it sounds like a cliche, but I spiraled into this pitch black depression that I just could not shake. Fast forward to December 1988, and the situation had exploded into a full-blown siege at a Malibu mansion with a SWAT team locking down the perimeter. Inside those walls, one of the biggest movie stars on the planet was sitting there in cuffs, totally broken, while his mega-famous wife was running for her life, battered and terrified, heading straight for the sheriff's office. Back then, the public thought they had the full scoop on that nightmare evening. But now, nearly 4 decades down the line, in 2026, it turns out the real story is way messier and darker than anyone dared to guess. So what was the actual poison that finally killed off the most volatile power couple of the 1980s? And the biggest mystery of all, why would the Queen of Pop later stand up for the very guy she once pointed the finger at? Stick around, because we are diving deep into the wedding that shook Tinseltown to its absolute core. Let's take it back to August 16th, 1985. Picture a stunning estate perched right on the edge of a cliff in Malibu, California, staring out at the vast Pacific Ocean. The sun is dipping below the horizon, splashing the sky with these gorgeous hues of tangerine and violet. But the vibe is ruined because there is a swarm of anywhere from 6 to 10 news choppers hovering above like hungry vultures, their engines screaming so loud you could barely hear the vows down below. This was the exact moment Madonna Louise Ciccone tied the knot with Sean Justin Penn. She was just about to hit 27 years old. He was a fresh-faced 25. Combined, they were on the verge of becoming the most scrutinised duo on the entire globe. They were young, drop-dead gorgeous, and sitting right at the very top of the fame game. But honestly, they were clueless about the storm they were walking into. The madness didn't even wait for the I-dos. It kicked off way before the ceremony even started. Somehow the secret got out that the biggest pop icon on earth was marrying Hollywood's edgiest bad boy. Naturally, the media went completely nuclear. Sean Penn was absolutely livid. In his mind, this was his big day, not some spectacle for the tabloids or a media circus. This was supposed to be a quiet, intimate moment between him and the woman he loved. Instead, it felt like the entire planet was peeping over the fence. So he pulled a classic Sean Penn move. He grabbed a marker, marched down to the shoreline and carved a message right into the sand. He made the letters massive so the pilots upstairs couldn't miss it. 2 simple words: back off. Pop art legend Andy Warhol was on the guest list that day. The artist, a man who had seen literally everything, stared up at the mechanical swarm buzzing around and said it felt less like a wedding and more like a scene straight out of Apocalypse Now. The man wasn't kidding either. The roar of the engines was ear-splitting. It was total unadulterated pandemonium. Yet right in the centre of that hurricane, 2 people were actually trying to exchange rings. The crowd sitting there was literally the A-list roster of 1980s pop culture. You had Tom Cruise looking like he just stepped off a movie poster. Cher was there too, oozing that signature glamour she is famous for. Then you had Christopher Walken rocking that intense, unblinking stare while Diane Keaton arrived looking effortlessly chic and impeccable. Carrie Fisher showed up still riding high from her Star Wars glory. And there was Martin Sheen, Sean's own dad, watching his kid get married while the sky roared like a war zone, something that probably felt eerily familiar from his own Vietnam War flicks. Madonna's brother Christopher was in the crowd too, witnessing his sister tie the knot with this volatile young actor. Years down the road, he would reflect on that afternoon and drop a seriously haunting comment about the whole ordeal. He said that all the insanity surrounding the wedding wasn't just noise. He believed it was a bad omen, a dark sign of everything that was waiting for them in the future. The invasive choppers, the anarchy, the simmering rage. It was all just a trailer for the horror movie their marriage would become. He didn't know how spot on his prediction was. The pair had only crossed paths about 7 months prior, back in January of 1985. Madonna was busy shooting the music video for Material Girl, which is iconic now, on a studio lot in Los Angeles. Sean just happened to be there visiting an old assistant who was working on the crew. He didn't realise he was walking into a life-altering moment. As soon as he laid eyes on her, it was over. Something just clicked. The chemistry was instant and explosive. Madonna felt the voltage too, and in true Madonna fashion, she made a bold move that proved exactly the kind of woman she was. It was a whirlwind. Within a few weeks, they were exclusive. A couple of months later, there was a ring on her finger. And by August, they were standing on that noisy cliffside saying their vows, while the paparazzi circled above like sharks sensing blood in the water. The producer behind the Material Girl shoot later confirmed in a documentary that despite the drama, Madonna was head over heels in love with Sean. But here is the thing nobody at the ceremony realised. Beneath Sean Penn's brooding heartthrob exterior and that piercing gaze, there was a volcano just waiting to blow its top. They were barely married. The ink on the certificate wasn't even dry when Sean committed his first violent act as a husband. And that outburst, it set the terrifying rhythm for the next 4 years of their lives together. The violence kicks off. We are talking June 1985 in Nashville, Tennessee. The summer humidity was suffocating, but it was nothing compared to the heat Sean Penn was about to bring to the table. At this point, he and Madonna had been hitched for less than a year. This was supposed to be the honeymoon period, that blissful window where everything is rosy and the future looks golden. Instead, Sean decided it was time to show the world the dark side lurking underneath that handsome movie star face. 2 reporters from the UK spotted the power couple strolling through town and did exactly what you'd expect reporters to do. They whipped out their cameras and started snapping away. Now, that is usually just the price of admission for being famous. It is the daily grind every celebrity has to deal with. But Sean Penn, he didn't subscribe to that philosophy. He absolutely hated the invasion of his personal space and wasn't having it. The reaction was shocking to anyone watching. Sean grabbed a rock from the ground and launched a full-on attack against them. The incident was so ugly it splashed across front pages on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean. Penn got slapped with a measly $100 fine and just walked away free. Can you believe that $100? That was the pathetic price tag put on his uncontrollable rage. But trust me, folks, that incident was merely the opening act. That rock-throwing episode in Nashville was just chapter 1 in a horrifying saga of violence that would come to define their entire toxic marriage. Fast forward to January of 1986, when the power couple jetted off to Macau to shoot a film titled Shanghai Surprise. Now, this flick was actually produced by none other than George Harrison, the legendary former Beatle known as the quiet spiritual one from the greatest band in music history. But what Harrison witnessed with his own eyes during that production would haunt him for the rest of his life. It completely shattered whatever opinion he previously held of Sean Penn. Rumours that spread like wildfire through Hollywood claimed that Sean Penn allegedly dangled a helpless photographer right over the edge of a 9th floor balcony. Just let that image sink in for a second. We are talking 9 stories up, hanging almost 100 feet above the concrete. One slip and it's over. And the reason all because the guy snapped a few photos of a famous couple. He was literally just doing his 9-to-5 job. George Harrison, a man who had survived the madness of Beatlemania and dealt with screaming mobs his whole adult life, was absolutely disgusted by what he saw. He later described Sean Penn using a phrase that's now infamous in the industry. He basically said Penn's erratic behaviour made the movie impossible to sell or promote. As for the movie itself, it was an absolute train wreck of a disaster. Shanghai Surprise had a budget of $17 million, huge money back in 1986, but it tanked, scraping up only $2.2 million at the box office. We are talking a massive loss of nearly $15 million. To add insult to injury, Madonna ended up winning the Golden Raspberry Award for Worst Actress. It was a total humiliation for a woman used to dominating the charts, but Sean wasn't finished with his violent outbursts. Not by a long shot. By June of 1986, he strolled into a Los Angeles nightclub called Helena's. This was the spot, the trendy joint where every celebrity went to see and be seen. A talented songwriter named David Walensky happened to be there that evening, just minding his own business and having a good time. Then he made the fatal mistake of simply saying goodnight to Madonna. That is it. He uttered 2 polite words. "Good night." And Sean Penn absolutely lost it. Right there on the club floor in front of dozens of shocked witnesses, Penn assaulted a man for the so-called crime of showing basic manners to his wife. Walensky hadn't flirted with her, he hadn't tried to touch her, he had simply acknowledged she existed with a friendly goodbye. And for that minor interaction, he was beaten down by one of Hollywood's biggest rising stars. Penn was arrested, slapped with assault charges, and sentenced to a year of probation. The dangerous pattern was becoming terrifyingly obvious to everyone watching from the sidelines. His jealousy was becoming all-consuming, burning like a wildfire that just could not be extinguished no matter what anyone did. His rage was totally unpredictable, erupting without warning. And Madonna found herself trapped in the eye of the storm, watching her husband destroy himself and their union one violent outburst at a time. Then came April of 1987. Sean was on set filming Colors, a gritty, intense drama focused on the gang violence plaguing Los Angeles. But even while working, something snapped inside him that pushed him right over the edge once again. He punched an extra, not a lead actor or not a crew member he was arguing with, but a background performer. An extra is someone who is basically just living scenery for the shot, but this time the law wasn't playing around and the consequences were severe. Sean Penn was sentenced to 60 days in county jail. He ended up serving 33 of those hard days behind bars. Picture it, one of Hollywood's most promising talents married to the biggest pop icon on the planet, rotting in a cell like a common thug because he couldn't control his temper. The tabloid headlines were brutal. The embarrassment for Madonna was total as her husband sat staring at grey concrete walls instead of movie cameras. Madonna was forced to ask herself some incredibly painful questions. Who was this volatile man she had tied her life to? Was this really the fairy tale romance she had dreamed of when she handed him that rose on the set of the Material Girl video? Was this the future she truly wanted? By December of 1987, Madonna made a choice that seemed to answer everything. She filed for divorce, the legal papers were submitted to the court, the toxic marriage was officially considered over. It seemed like the nightmare was finally coming to an end. But then a twist happened that nobody saw coming. Just 2 weeks later, Madonna withdrew the divorce petition. She completely changed her mind and decided to give Sean one more shot. It was a choice that would come back to haunt her for the rest of her life. Because what went down on the night of December 28th, 1988 would become one of the most controversial and disputed events in the entire history of celebrity scandals. It was the night everything changed forever. It was December 28th, 1988, right in the middle of the holiday season. Christmas lights were still twinkling in windows all across America. It should have been a time for family, for celebration and for peace on earth. But inside the Penn mansion in Malibu, overlooking that same Pacific Ocean where they had wed 3 years prior, there was absolutely no peace to be found. There was only pure terror. What exactly transpired that night has been the subject of fierce debate for over 30 years. The original police reports have long since been destroyed, wiped out, according to California's standard record retention policies. However, according to multiple biographers who cited police sources before those files were purged, the allegations were absolutely horrific. The story goes that Sean Penn allegedly bound Madonna to a chair with... The reports mentioned he used thick industrial cord, the sort that digs deep into the flesh, binding her wrists. Supposedly, he was threatening to shear off her iconic platinum locks, the very look that made her a global superstar. Witnesses claimed he was swigging hard liquor right out of the bottle, fueling a rage that reportedly dragged on for hours without a single break. It was just an endless nightmare of fear unfolding inside the sanctuary of their own private residence. Years down the line, a police lieutenant opened up to biographers about that night. He described the moment Madonna stumbled into the station, and his recollection of the scene is absolutely chilling. He admitted he barely realised who she was. Here was arguably the most recognisable face on the planet, yet in that moment she was so battered she was practically a stranger to him. She was completely breaking down, sobbing without pause. With a split lip and visible marks, it was brutally clear she had taken a physical beating. The Queen of Pop didn't look like a superstar. She looked like a survivor of domestic assault, which aligns perfectly with the terrifying story she told the officers. Meanwhile, back at their Malibu estate, things were spiralling out of control with frightening speed. Sean had apparently stepped out to restock his booze supply, only to come back and find the bird had flown the coop. The bindings were loose and his wife was nowhere to be found. When the cops rolled up to the gates, Penn wasn't interested in talking. He barricaded himself inside, refusing to step out or answer a single question. That is when the situation turned critical. Decades later, in a 2024 sit-down with the New York Times, Sean finally verified the crazy details of the aftermath. The scenario he described sounds like something ripped straight out of an action movie script. We aren't talking about a couple of patrol officers knocking on the door. A full-blown SWAT team descended on his property. These guys were decked out in heavy tactical gear, the squad you call for terrorists or hostage crises, all there just to bring in a Hollywood A-lister in Malibu. Penn recounted the memory with an eerie sense of detachment. He remembers telling them flat out, "I'm not coming out there." He actually told them he was going to finish his breakfast first. Picture that: heavily armed officers surrounding your home and you are worried about your eggs getting cold. Suddenly, glass started shattering everywhere as the team breached the perimeter and swarmed the house. Within moments, he was cuffed and in custody. That same evening, Madonna officially filed a police report against her husband. She put her accusations on the official record, but then about 7 days later, she threw everyone a curveball. She pulled the complaint completely. She rescinded her statement and dropped the whole matter. There would be no criminal charges pressed against him. No courtroom drama, no sworn testimony. The events of December 28, 1988 were destined to remain a cold case left to rumours and gossip. However, while she wasn't looking to put him behind bars, she was definitely finished with the relationship. On January 5th, 1989, barely a week after the incident, she headed back to court to file for divorce. This wasn't a drill. There was no turning back this time, and certainly no more second chances for Sean. She checked the box for irreconcilable differences and called it a day. By September 1989, the papers were signed, marking the end of one of Tinseltown's most explosive unions. After 4 long years filled with tabloid drama, alleged violence and constant chaos, the Madonna Penn saga was history. Everyone figured that was it. The public expected Madonna to spend her future trashing the guy who caused her so much misery. We all thought the book was closed on them for good. But we couldn't have been more wrong. 26 years down the road, the Material Girl pulled a move that stunned everyone who remembered the 80s. She actually went to court to defend Sean Penn, and her sworn statement flipped the entire narrative on its head. It was a shocking legal twist that went down back in 2015. Over 25 years had flown by since that dark night in Malibu, and Madonna had cemented her status as a global icon. She was the undisputed queen of pop, while Sean had snagged 2 Oscars and was widely considered one of the best actors of his generation. They had both carved out incredible lives, but those ugly rumours from 1988 haunted them like a shadow that refused to fade. It was just common knowledge. In Hollywood law, Sean Penn beat up Madonna. End of story. That is until filmmaker Lee Daniels decided to speak up. Daniels was riding high as the creator of Empire, a massive TV hit at the time. He was in the middle of a media storm trying to defend actor Terrence Howard, who had openly confessed to getting physical with his ex-wife. When pressed about Howard's violent streak during an interview, Daniels made a clumsy comparison that would land him in hot water. He claimed Howard's actions were no worse than what Marlon Brando or Sean Penn had done in their pasts. When word got back to Sean Penn, he was absolutely livid. He had worked tirelessly to scrub that bad boy image and reinvent himself as a prestigious artist and a dedicated humanitarian. And suddenly, here was a TV producer casually lumping him in with a guy who admitted to hitting women on national television. Penn didn't just let it slide. He slapped Daniels with a $10 million defamation suit. The filing argued that Daniels was destroying Penn's good name by regurgitating old false rumours about domestic abuse. This is the point in the saga where the plot twists so violently it leaves everyone reeling. Madonna didn't just stay silent. She filed a sworn affidavit explicitly backing Sean Penn, not fighting him, but vouching for him. She was going to bat for the very man the public was convinced had made her life a living hell. The icon who had allegedly run for her life battered and bloody to a police precinct was now standing tall in the court of law to defend her supposed abuser. The same woman who had accused him of absolutely horrific acts back in 1988 was now determined to help him secure a legal victory. It went down as one of the most jaw-dropping moments in the history of celebrity scandals. The words contained in her legal statement were nothing short of a bombshell. "Sean has never struck me," she declared under penalty of perjury. She insisted he never tied her up, contrary to the wild rumours. She stated he never physically assaulted her in any way, calling any report suggesting otherwise completely outrageous, malicious, reckless and flat-out false. She didn't stop there either. "While we certainly had more than one screaming match during our marriage," she admitted, "Sean has never struck me. Not a single time, not ever." Madonna went on to describe Sean as a gentle, caring and compassionate human being. These were sentiments absolutely no one expected to hear. This was the guy she had supposedly fled from in a state of sheer terror. The guy who was slapped in handcuffs by a SWAT team right in his own kitchen. The man whose explosive temper had splashed across front pages all over the globe. Yet here was his ex-wife labelling him kind and compassionate. The public was left scratching their heads, wondering what on earth was really going on. The questions started pouring in from every angle. Was Madonna telling tall tales back in 1988 when she showed up at that sheriff's station? Or was she perjuring herself now to save face? Had she forgiven Sean so completely that she was willing to rewrite their entire history? Or maybe there was something far more complex bubbling beneath the surface, a dynamic that outsiders could never truly wrap their minds around. The legal battle finally wrapped up for good in May of 2016. Lee Daniels had to eat humble pie, issuing a public apology to Sean Penn and admitting those comparisons were way out of line. He also cut a significant check to Penn's Haiti charity, a foundation focused on helping the island nation bounce back from catastrophic earthquakes. Case closed. Sean Penn walked away with the win, but the mystery lingered, and it still haunts people to this day. Why defend a man who allegedly terrorised her? Why would she gamble with her own credibility and reputation just to support his lawsuit? Why risk getting branded a liar just to help an ex-husband? The secret might be hidden in what went down between them after the divorce papers were signed. Because while the tabloids painted them as bitter enemies destined for eternal hatred, a totally different story was unfolding behind closed doors. It was a romance that simply refused to die. In 1991, just 2 years after their split was finalised, Madonna released her documentary Truth or Dare. The film trailed her during the iconic Blonde Ambition World Tour, exposing a raw, fragile side of the pop superstar that fans had never witnessed before. During one scene in the documentary, someone hit her with a simple question that carried heavy baggage. Who was the love of your life? Madonna didn't hesitate for a microsecond. She didn't name drop some new fling she was seeing. She didn't deflect with a witty joke. She didn't pretend she had never really been in love. She stared right into the camera lens with absolute sincerity and dropped one name. Sean, the man she had escaped from just 2 years earlier, the guy whose rage had made international headlines. The very same man she would later stand up for in court against abuse allegations. Despite all the chaos and drama they had lived through, he was still the love of her life. That confession left audiences around the world with their jaws on the floor. As the years rolled on, their friendship only tightened, becoming more visible to the public eye. You would see them popping up at each other's galas and fundraisers, always speaking with such warmth about one another in interviews. The venom and resentment that everyone anticipated, it just never materialised. Instead, we saw genuine tenderness. By 2016, that reconnection took centre stage in the most dramatic way possible. Sean Penn throws a massive annual gala in Los Angeles to generate funds for relief efforts in Haiti. His organisation has pulled in millions of dollars to help that Caribbean nation reconstruct after brutal natural disasters. That specific year, Madonna wasn't just a guest, she was a headlining act at the event. She stepped up before a crowd of high rollers and celebrities to belt out La Vie en Rose, that timeless French anthem about seeing the world through rose-coloured glasses. Then she cut the music and spoke straight to Sean, right there with the whole room watching and cameras rolling on every angle. "I love you," she told her former spouse, plain and simple. "From the very second I laid eyes on you on that studio lot back in 1985, and I still love you just as much all these years later. I just wish you would quit smoking so many cigarettes." The crowd absolutely lost it. There she was, the queen of pop herself, publicly professing her undying love for her ex-husband, the man the entire world believed was a villain. And she delivered it with a beaming smile on her face and pure warmth in her voice. Later that same year, in December 2016, things got interesting when Madonna hosted a high-profile charity gala down in Miami. Among the glitzy crowd, Sean Penn made a surprise appearance. What went down between the two ex-lovers turned into immediate breaking news that splashed across every gossip blog, tabloid cover and entertainment feed on the planet. In a move that shocked the room, Sean hopped up on stage and jokingly slapped a pair of handcuffs onto Madonna's wrists in front of the entire A-list crowd. Just pause and really think about the heavy symbolism of that moment for a second. Let the irony of that image actually sink in. Here was the man once accused of physically restraining her against her will during their volatile marriage, now playfully binding himself to her as a gag, and she was absolutely loving it. She did not just tolerate it, she found it hilarious. Standing there linked to him by steel cuffs, Madonna quipped to the audience, "The many moments that were our marriage." The room erupted with laughter at her dark humour. But then the Queen of Pop took it a step further and did something that grabbed headlines everywhere. She actually offered to remarry Sean right there on the spot. The only catch, someone in the audience had to bid $150,000 for her charity auction. Looking her ex-husband dead in the eyes, she declared, "I am still in love with you." And her voice carried a weight that sounded completely sincere. Without missing a beat or hesitating for even a second, Sean agreed to the remarriage proposal. A collective gasp swept through the audience as everyone tried to process what they were seeing. For one brief surreal moment, it looked like the most explosive and turbulent celebrity marriage of the 1980s was about to be resurrected decades later. How did this total transformation happen? How in the world did a toxic relationship that ended with SWAT teams, police reports and bleeding lips evolve into a genuine friendship full of laughter and public confessions of love? Well, Sean Penn himself finally decided to pull back the curtain and provide some answers in a series of recent interviews. What he had to say revealed a perspective on their relationship that nobody had ever really considered before. Sean Penn officially breaks his silence. You have to understand, for decades, this guy almost never spoke publicly about his chaotic marriage to Madonna. Whenever reporters or interviewers tried to bring it up, he would dodge the question with a sarcastic joke or pivot the conversation to literally anything else. The ugly allegations from 1988 hung over his reputation like a dark storm cloud that refused to clear, but he seemed dead set on ignoring them, letting the mystery fester. Then in 2024, the dynamic shifted completely. Sean Penn sat down for an incredibly revealing and candid profile with the New York Times. For the first time in forever, he was actually willing to talk openly about his past, own up to his mistakes, and discuss his complex relationship with his super famous ex-wife. When the reporter asked him point blank about Madonna, his answer was simple but hit hard. "She is someone I love," he stated, without a hint of hesitation. He went on to break down exactly why their post-divorce friendship managed to blossom so quickly, a fact that had confused onlookers for years. It turns out, he explained thoughtfully, it is a whole lot quicker to repair a broken friendship after a divorce when there are no kids involved to complicate things. The interviewer then pressed Penn on the most persistent and damaging rumour that ever came out of his marriage. We are talking about the infamous baseball bat story. For years, whisper networks and tabloids had circulated the allegation that Sean had brutally beaten Madonna with a baseball bat during one of their blowouts. It was easily one of the most disturbing claims from their time together, and it had dogged his career for decades. Sean's response, however, was unexpected and strangely logical. He did not fly into a rage or storm out of the interview room. He did not plead the fifth or refuse to answer. Instead, he offered a darkly humorous observation that cut straight through the noise and got to the heart of the matter. He calmly said, "If I hit Mike Tyson in the head with a baseball bat, he is going to the hospital." His point was crystal clear and frankly hard to argue with. If he had actually attacked a human being with a baseball bat, the physical damage would have been undeniable and catastrophic. There would have been hospital admission records, police reports and medical files. There would have been horrific photographs of the injuries. There would have been something way more substantial than just rumours and allegations that were later completely withdrawn by the accuser. Fast forward to May 2026 and Sean appeared on a podcast with the legendary British documentary filmmaker Louis Theroux for a wide-ranging and deeply personal chat. At one point during the conversation, Louis dug into the archives and brought up something sentimental Madonna had said years earlier. She had gone on record calling Sean the love of her life multiple times. Louis wanted to know, how did hearing that make him feel? "It is very sweet," Sean replied, his voice filled with what seemed like genuine warmth and affection. "She has been a good friend for a lot of years now." He then reflected on their short-lived but incredibly intense marriage with a surprising amount of honesty and self-awareness. He admitted it did not take us long to realise that we had totally mistaken a good first date for a lifetime wedding partner. They had fallen in love at warp speed. They rushed down the aisle. They had confused burning chemistry for long-term compatibility. But then he added a crucial detail that showed just how much he has grown. "I have a lot of fond memories from that time," he insisted. "It is not all jail." That last line was vintage Sean Penn using self-deprecating humour to poke fun at his own criminal record. It showed an awareness of his own troubled history, acknowledging the darkness of those years while still claiming that something good and real had existed in the wreckage. He also went on to reveal exactly how fast they had managed to reconcile once the divorce papers were finally signed and sealed. It didn't actually take us forever to bounce back after the marriage ended. He mentioned that it took maybe a year or so before we could pivot into a genuine friendship. Between 2024 and 2026, the Sky Network dropped a fascinating documentary series titled Becoming Madonna. This project deep dived into her meteoric ascent between 1978 and 1992, chronicling her evolution from a struggling NYC dancer into the absolute biggest pop icon on Earth. To tell the story right, the filmmakers dug into the vault, pulling out rare archival audio tapes and gritty vintage clips that really captured the vibe of that specific era. Viewers also got to hear directly from the inner circle, featuring interviews with friends and associates who actually knew her back when she was still fighting her way to the top. One of the most poignant elements was the inclusion of Madonna's late brother, Christopher, who sadly left us in October of 2024. Through older archival tapes, Christopher offered haunting reflections on that infamous chaotic wedding, suggesting the media frenzy was a dark foreshadowing of the turbulence awaiting the couple. Now, a staggering 36 years after the ink dried on their divorce papers, Madonna and Sean Penn are surprisingly still very much a part of each other's lives. They didn't end up as the bitter adversaries the tabloids predicted. Instead, their dynamic evolved into something far more intricate, layered, and authentically human. It is the story of two intense souls who dove into romance way too quickly and at too young an age, sparking a flame that burned dangerously bright and incredibly hot. Despite inflicting massive amounts of heartache and genuine fear upon one another, they miraculously navigated through the wreckage to forge a lasting friendship on the other side. So what is your take on the wild saga of Madonna and Sean? Drop your opinions in the comments section below.